Today's quote is from Shakespeare. Brevity is the soul of wit. True Spy Stories by Deary. A Brush with Death. Date, May 1943. Place, Caen, France. "What did you do in the war, Papa?" the boy asked. René Duché pushed his chair back from the supper table and picked at his teeth with a grubby fingernail. "A little of this, a little of that," he said. "Were you a soldier?" the boy asked. "No, Jacques. The Germans took over Caen long before I had a chance to join the army." "So did you fight in the underground? Michel Simon's papa was in the underground. He was a fighter, and they gave him a medal after the war. Did you fight with him?" "No, I wasn't in the underground." "So what did you do?" The boy's mother, Odette Duché, came in from the kitchen to take away his plate. "He made a nuisance of himself," she laughed. "You smack my ear if I make a nuisance of myself," the child grumbled. "Your father would have got a bullet behind the ear if he'd been caught," his mother said. "He was a spy, Jacques." The boy's eyes opened wide in wonder. "Were you really, Papa?" Duché spread his hands. "I did what I could." "Tell me about it." "Oh, it was nothing special," the man said, pulling down the corners of his mouth, yet looking pleased at the same time. "Come on, Duché," his wife said. "Tell him about the time you stole the secret plans." "Very well," the man said, and poured himself a glass of wine. "As you know, I'm a decorator. Whenever I could, I worked for the Germans. I hoped I could pick up bits of information once I was inside their headquarters and their camps. If I was painting a room and I overheard something, then I'd pass it on to my friends at the Café des Touristes. They had contacts in the underground, of course." "But tell me about the secret plans," young Jacques demanded. "I'm coming to that," Duché said. "It all started when I saw an advert in the town hall. The Germans wanted someone to decorate their commander's office. I went down to the camp to see their officer in charge. Mind you, it was hard to get in to see him. There were sentries on guard. Their French was poor, and my German wasn't too good either. I tried to explain that I was a painter. I walked up to the side of the sentry box and pretended to paint it. Suddenly, Duché laughed. "What's funny, Papa?" "The sentry smacked me in the face with the back of his hand and knocked me off my feet." "Why did he do that?" "Because the German leader, Adolf Hitler, used to be a house painter. The sentry thought I was making fun of their great hero. Ha! The man dragged me to my feet and dragged me in to see his captain. Of course, that's exactly the man I wanted to see in the first place. He spoke good French, and at last I explained what I wanted. He said there were other decorators who had already offered to wallpaper the office. I guessed that the cheapest they could do it for would be 15,000 francs. I offered to do it for 12,000. It would cost me money, but it would get me right into the heart of the German organization." "Weren't you scared, Papa?" "Not at first. I was just an honest decorator doing work for the Germans. Then I met Major Schneiderer. He was a heavy man, completely bald, and on his cheek there was a scar he said he got in a duel. He was not a man to upset, I could see. As usual, I acted like a simple French peasant, but all the time I was looking for my chance. When that chance came, it was sooner and greater than I could have imagined. It was the next day, in fact. I took some wallpaper pattern books into Major Schneiderer's office. He was just looking through them when he had a special parcel delivered. "Secret letters?" Jacques guessed. "Maps," his father said. Schneiderer held them up to the window to study them, and I could see there were the plans of the German defenses on the coast at Normandy. It was exactly what the British and Americans needed to know if they were going to land on the French coast and defeat the Germans. Then there was a knock at the door, and Schneiderer went to answer it. The maps, those top-secret maps, were lying on the table in front of me. Take one, a voice in my head kept saying. But I knew that I'd be suspected if I tried to walk out with them under my jacket. I'd be searched, then tortured until I'd given the names of my contacts in the underground. Then, I'd be killed. Were you scared then? Terrified. My shirt was stuck to my back with the sweat running down it. My mouth was as dry as if I were in a desert. My whole body was shaking. If that pile of plans were all copies of the same plan, then they might not miss one. If they were all different, then he would notice a missing one immediately. It was a gamble. "So what did you do?" the boy breathed. I crossed the room. Schneiderer was at the door, talking to his secretary in the next room. If he just turned his head, he would see me. I reached on the table and laid my hands on the top plan. I looked around the room for somewhere to hide it. The chimney was no use. On a cold day, they'd light the fire and discover it. but there was a heavy gold-framed mirror over the fireplace. I picked the map up and slipped it behind the mirror. I only hoped I'd have a chance to get it before a German discovered it. And did they? Schneiderer came back into the room and chose his wallpaper at last. I said I'd be back on Monday to put the wallpaper up. I will have the walls cleared ready, he said. No, I said, and I thought I was going to choke. That's something my workers do very well. They will put everything back exactly where they find it. There is no need for you to trouble yourself, Major. And I walked out of the office. I don't know how. My legs would scarcely hold me up. I went straight to the Café des Touristes and swallowed a very large brandy, I can tell you. Odette sat at the table next to her husband and rested her chin on her hands. When your father told me what he'd done, I didn't sleep. He snored his great ugly head off, and I lay awake. I was just waiting for the Gestapo to knock on the door, march us out, and shoot us. Would they have shot me? Jacques asked. Probably, his mother said. You were just a baby, but that Schneiderer may have shot you to teach the good French people of Caen a lesson. The boy shuddered. But you got the plan, father. It wasn't that easy. I went in on the Monday morning and asked for Schneiderer. An officer called Keller said Schneiderer had been transferred. Keller was in charge now, and he was too busy sorting out his new job to have his office papered that day, or the next day. It was going to be Wednesday before I got into the room. 2 more nights without sleep, Odette Duché sighed. You know, we had Gestapo officers living just 2 doors away from us. I'll swear I almost fainted every time I saw one walk past our door. That was nothing to the terror of walking into Keller's office that Wednesday morning, Duché said. After all, he could have found the map and simply waited and watched for me to collect it. As soon as he left me alone, I checked that it was still there, and I took it out. But that could have been part of his plan. He'd wait till I walked out, and then arrest me with the map in my bag. Is that what happened? I worked all day in the office. I finished at 5, rolled the map up, and pushed it inside my jacket pocket. I said good night to Keller. He just nodded at me. I walked down the stairs, past guards on the door. I said good night to them, and they let me leave. Then I reached the sentries at the fence. They let me walk through. I walked straight down the main street, all the time waiting for a voice to cry, "Halt!" and order me back, or even just a bullet in the back of the head. It seemed that 100-meter walk to the Café des Touristes was 100 kilometers. But did I lose my nerve? No, papa. No. I stepped through the door and my friends were waiting for me. Deschamps, the plumber, Dumey, the mechanic, and Harry Vell, my contact in the underground. And at the table nearest the counter was a German soldier. To arrest you? Jacques gasped. He could have been. He was an old soldier who often called in the Café des Touristes when his duty was finished for the day. We thought he was a spy at first, but soon learned he was quite harmless. His army overcoat was hanging by the door, and I pushed my way past it to get to the table of my friends. Well, they asked. I have it, I said quietly, though we knew old Albert could speak no French. But he would have seen you hand over the map, Jacques said. He would have seen me hand over the map. So I didn't. Imagine the danger. There was a police car outside the cafe with 2 men in raincoats seated in the back. I knew they were not French police. They were German secret state police, the Gestapo. They could have come in at any time to search us. So what did you do? I played dominoes with my friends, of course, and I kept playing until the car with the Gestapo started up, drove slowly past the cafe, and then disappeared out of the town. Then you handed over the map? There was still old Albert inside the cafe, remember? Of course. Then Albert finished his drink and got up to go. I jumped to my feet, stepped across to the door, and took hold of his overcoat. When he reached the coat stand, I held up the coat and helped him to get into it. Dankeschön, he said. That's German for thank you. And he left. Harryville asked, What have you got for me? There's 1 more train to Paris today. I can be on it if you have important information. And I told him, the most important information you will ever carry. And I took the plans from inside my jacket. He was on the last train to Paris, and the plans were with the British inside a week. That was dangerous, young Jacques said. What if the Gestapo had come into the cafe and searched you? René Duché grinned and looked at his wife. If they had searched me from head to toe, they would have found absolutely nothing. Were they hidden under the table? No. Then what did you do with them? The boy cried. René Duché sat back in his chair and took a long drink of the red wine. I hid them in the only safe place in the whole cafe. I hid them in the overcoat pocket of old Albert, the German soldier. You didn't. As I entered the cafe, I'd seen the Gestapo car, and I didn't want to be caught with the plans. I certainly didn't want to pass them over to Harryville for him to get caught. I slipped them into the soldier's coat when it was hanging on the coat stand. As soon as he got up to go, I grabbed the coat and took them out again. He thought I was being a gentleman. I knew I was helping to defeat him and his invaders. Jacques' eyes were glowing. Wait till I tell Michel Simon. My father's a hero. Germany isn't the only country to have a house painter for a hero, René shrugged. Did you get a medal, Papa? No, my son. But when the war was over, we had a great celebration in the town hall. The fighting men of the underground were honored, and it was only right that they should be. But when the speeches were all over and the cheering had died down, the mayor came over to me and spoke to me. We will never forget the part you played, René, he said. Madame Duché poked him sharply in the shoulder and said, Tell Jacques what else the mayor said to you. The mayor said, René, there is no doubt about your madness, and there is no doubt about your courage. You see, Jacques, Odette Duché said as she put an arm around her husband's shoulders and squeezed. You don't have to be a soldier with a medal to be a hero. The secret plans that Duché stole were vital for British and American forces when they invaded the French coast in 1944. They knew where the German defenses were strong and where they were weak. They let false information reach the German defenders. It said that the British and Americans would land in one place, when in fact they planned to land in another. Spies need to use such tricks to confuse an enemy.